Welcome everyone here to the Thriving Marriage Podcast. We're excited and grateful to be here with you today as we talk about what prevents your spouse from coming back. Now, I'm Heather Choate. I'm here with Marc Johnston and Marc. We're the owners of High Thrive Coaching. We have helped about 15,000 couples now with their relationship. And we have seen a lot of this situation where your spouse is not wanting to come back. So we're excited to share that with you guys today and want to thank you for coming here to the Thriving Marriage as we serve you in our intention to becoming the number one resource in the world for marriages. So this is going to be a two-part podcast, and we're going to look deep into many things that may be tripping you up while also trying to fix your marriage. So I want to make sure that you guys watch both parts. It's vital to understand what is blocking you. And then next week, we'll talk with you further about a ton of solutions on how to get your marriage back on track towards happiness. So make sure to listen to both parts. Marc, we felt like this is deserving of two parts because we want to go deep into understanding what is actually blocking you. Why is that so important for people to know?
Well, honestly, it's hard to just say, okay, this one thing is what's preventing your spouse from coming back or preventing you from going forward. And we feel here that if you apply the wrong solution to the wrong problem potentially, or even the right solution to the wrong problem, it's going to really hurt your progress. It's going to really either be ineffective or potentially damaging to your efforts. And so we really wanted to go quite a bit deeper, help you to understand a lot of the nuances. And we're hoping to touch on a good chunk of that today. And then like Heather said, touch on some other pieces next week and a lot of the solutions next week as well.
Awesome. So before we dive into that, we're going to share our client win of the week. This one comes from Derek with permission. He shared in our Thriving Marriage Facebook group. After thriving marriage, my wife and I are back together and working through our challenges. Not easy, but worth it. Life is great. A lot of wins. So a really short, concise client win of the week, but it's super powerful, packs a punch that he and his wife are back together and they're working through their challenges. I'd love to see that progress. So awesome to see that there. Now, in the Thriving Marriage Facebook group, speaking of that, we asked you guys what prevents your spouse from coming back. Marc, what did we see happen over there?
Well, there's a lot of little things, like a lot of just comments, very, very specific to their situation. But we did see some themes, and that's kind of what we wanted to point out today is some of those themes. There are a lot of common reasons. There might be infidelity. I know here in High Thrive, we talk a lot about the narrative, and I saw some elements of that. Some people talking about hatred or contempt, or someone talking about rewriting the story, resentment. And we're going to get into this quite a bit in detail, but a lot of these I like to categorized as either logical reasons or emotional reasons, and having some different understanding for both of those. But as I said, resentment is a really big emotional reason to step away. And we see a lot of those emotional reasons. And then we also see things like I said, the infidelity, someone says the lock on their door, just little logical things that, events that have happened, things like that. Anyways, we're seeing a wide array, and we want to help you kind of understand there's different ideas, themes at play here.
Yeah. So like Marc said, this week we want to go over a lot of the logical reasons why your spouse may not be fighting for your marriage. And then next week, we're going to go into some of those emotional reasons, as well as solutions to all of this. Mm-hmm. You guys know me, I'm always solution-oriented, solution-based. I want to take action and move forward. I know that's why you guys want to listen too. But I think it's really important that we understand why things are where they're at and what's really going on there. So like Marc mentioned, we don't apply maybe even the right solution, but to the wrong problem. Let's uncover what your problem is. And I'm just going to put a plug in for this right off the bat. This is one of the things that we do is we help you uncover exactly what the problem is in your marriage and help you provide the right solution to it. Now that may seem like silly, but I think as we get into this, you guys are going to get it. You're going to see that a lot of people really have no clue why their spouse is really wanting out, and they're making assumptions about what they think the problem is. And maybe they're just trying like this, what's the word? Just a gunshot approach. What's that? When you're like shooting with the gun that shoots all the birds. What is that? What is that gun?
I want to say, I'm not a good
word right now. It's
I want to say it's like buckshot when you put
buckshot. Yeah. When you just have like this buckshot approach to trying to like hit everything instead of really understanding what it's going to take to turn things around. So if you guys want our help with that, we offer a free call. So I'm going to put the plug in now. You can get that at highthrivecoaching.com/apply. Don't wait. Let's figure out what's really going on. All right. So beyond logical versus emotional reasons, we're going to go into further dividing our reasons here. So Marc, take it away.
Yeah. So I like to divide this into two big branches, figuring out why your spouse isn't coming back. And the reason why I'm dividing this is, like I said, if we're applying even potentially the right solutions to the wrong problems, we're going to get some problems here. And I think this is like the big category, the big division in terms of like where you want to place some solutions. So the big two areas that I see is when your spouse is perhaps not interested in making things better. And I'm going to talk a lot about those different reasons there. But also I see a fair amount of situations where a partner is interested, but something might be holding them back. And I mean, that can be really frustrating. I can see a lot of cases there like, hey, I love you, but I'm not in love with you. There's a lot of those cases I see. Now, like I said, the reason why I'm dividing this up is because these different areas you're going to approach very differently. Like if your spouse just completely is not interested in making things better, it's not going to do a whole lot of good to say, hey, why don't we work on things? It could be better. If only, like, all that begging and pleading tends to not really do a whole lot here. It's just they've lost interest. And that's why, Heather, you and I, we talk a lot about finding common goals, finding, sometimes we refer to it as acceptable arenas, areas that you can talk about things and improve. Because a lot of this is aimed at increasing interest and motivation for the relationship. The other side of that is, like I said, that area where your partner might be interested in making things better. There's too many obstacles in the way, and they become demotivated. They become hopeless and any sort of solution working. And that's a very different sort of space to be in. But let's start with those situations when your partner is not interested in making things better and why that might be happening.
Yeah, and leave a comment below if you guys feel like that's the camp you're in. Are you in a situation where your partner is not interested in helping things become better? Or are you in the camp where maybe they are interested, but something's holding them back? So what are some reasons why people might not be interested in making things better?
Let's get this one right off the bat. We'll put it aside. We're all thinking it, right? I think one of the first things that people think of, and I almost always hear some question of this is there somebody else? Mm-hmm. And I will admit, this is a big factor in creating a lack of interest. So we have this duality here where we have problems or obstacles or yuck in the relationship. And here comes someone that is offering for things to be a lot easier and more exciting. And it just feels good all of a sudden. And when you have that big contrast, it really can kill a lot of motivation if the marriage doesn't have a good solid base. And that's a lot of times where I see the affair really wreck things, is the affair is the culmination point here. How often are we seeing this as an excuse for not wanting to come back? It's a lot of cases.
Yeah, there's a lot. Yeah. And even like you said, even if they're isn't someone actually that they're involved with, you're always wondering, is there someone else? Right? Because that becomes a big barrier to them wanting to work on the relationship.
Well, we could even apply this in a slightly different way, is if it's not somebody else, it's still that same duality where there's problems in the relationship and some other solution comes about. Some other way that things become easier, and just you're not seeing any way to make things better in the relationship. So I've seen cases where someone's offered another job in another state, and they just like, you know what, I'm going and I'm gone. And it might seem all of a sudden, but here essentially like what it was, in the cases that I'm thinking of, it's this person who sees all these issues within the marriage, and now I have a way out. Yeah. And I have this situation where I don't have to deal with any of this stuff. And I consider a lot of those very similar. Now, like the affair is obviously different, but they have some similar elements. Right along with that is another reason. Now, I understand that there are sometimes situations where this is not a debilitating or marriage-wrecking situation, but sometimes pornography or other addictions, really. Yeah. And I'm going to lump all out of those together. I mentioned pornography because it does have a lot of. I was going to use the word stickiness, and that's probably the wrong word for that context. But like it just kind of makes everything. It's so tied to relationships for some people that it creates issues there. But really, like we could say pornography and other addictions, because a lot of these things have some huge impact on how you relate to other people. Mm-hmm. Whether that's pornography, we could even look at alcohol. Similarly, if there's a huge alcohol problem, look at how that impacts how you relate to other people. Now, I understand the state of where the scientific community is specifically on a behavioral addiction like pornography, meaning like as of the DSM-5, actually, I have it here. I have it here on my desk. The DSM-5, for those of you who aren't, the DSM is just like the manual for diagnosing people. As of the DSM-5, pornography addiction was not listed as a mental health diagnosis, even though some other behavioral addictions are, like gambling, for instance. But there is some amount of research out there that indicates that it increases irritability. It might cause difficulty in sexual performance, difficulty concentrating. It may result in escalation, like needing more graphic material. And a lot of these things have similar qualities as other addictions.
Right.
But the whole point here is if you have an addiction, whether this is a behavioral or substance addiction, it has some ability to cause things like some decrease in desire to make things work if you have to keep revisiting these same problems over and over again. And that's all I'm pointing out here. Whatever your views are on, say, alcohol, drug use, pornography use, whatever, it has an impact. What are some other things? We're talking about logical reasons here, Heather, logical reasons why people might be not interested in working on a marriage.
That's when we say logical, then the word's emotional.
Oh, yeah. It's kind of weird to put that in that category.
Right.
Let's take it from a logical angle, though.
Right. From a logical angle is like, I keep getting hurt in this situation and it's no longer rewarding for me to be here. Mm-hmm. It's more rewarding or feels safer to be in a different situation outside the marriage with someone else, doing something else. And so from a logical standpoint, if there's been a lot of this going on, then it's going to be a barrier for them to want to work on the marriage with you.
I'm thinking like a lot of these logical reasons are just like the kind of like the excuses or the reasons people list as they are saying that they are done with the marriage. And a lot of times I do hear these sort of things like this idea, I can't get over what has happened 5 years ago, 10 years ago. I can't believe that my partner treated me this way. I can't believe that they did this or that. And it might even be these reasons that are unspoken. You may not be aware of these emotional woundings that have happened, but these are the thoughts that are running through your partner's head as they say, I can't get over what has happened to me from this person. And they might keep beating on that drum. And that's why I'm kind of listing it hesitantly under this logical category. It's because it is the vocally spoken argument sometimes.
Yeah. Another reason is they just want their freedom. Sometimes we just feel like I just want out. I want to find myself. I want freedom. I want to be able to do what I want. I'm tired of you controlling me. Marc, what's coming to my mind as we're sharing many of these things is the story. And that's kind of how we lump all of these things, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of you guys in the group, our Thriving Marriage Facebook group, we're talking about the narrative or the story. If you're new to us, this is something that we feel like is fundamental to being able to restore a marriage, is uncovering what your partner's story or narrative or belief about you is, and then shifting that story so they see the possibility of being happy with you and they want to be with you. So if they're saying like, I just want freedom, and you're a barrier to that freedom that they're wanting in their mind, that's their story about you, then it's going to lead to a decrease in them not being interested in making things better. And so that's another one. Marc, any thoughts on that?
I see this a lot with, especially if there's a lot of conflict avoidance within the relationship. I'll be honest, a little bit open. My wife and I were even talking about this sort of idea, not that my wife's saying that she wants her freedom from me, but like she was expressing like a sense of overwhelm, that things have felt overwhelming in general in life. And she's like, why don't we just, go. Essentially, she was suggesting couch surfing with like various family members across the country. And she's like, we should just go back out west. And my grandpa lives out there and I have some cousins out there and we'll just kind of get away from things. I mean, similar idea. I think they're both kind of tied to the sense of overwhelm or feeling limited in options, feeling stagnant, feeling controlled. And so this is how it comes out. They say, I just want to be free.
Yeah.
From all this.
Breakthrough. Sometimes it's escapism. Like, I just want to get away. I just want to like get away. And there's a healthy element. Like there's a healthy outlet for those things. I want to put this down. I want to break. Like that's fair enough. Right. But when it becomes, I want out of the marriage, I want out of responsibilities, I want out of major life commitments here. It becomes problematic to them wanting to work on the marriage. I often see this around like midlife crisis time, right? We often hear this like, I want freedom.
I just want to work on my car. I just want to, whatever happens to be.
Yeah. I want to go have sex with whoever I want. Like, I want freedom. I want to go party. I want to go drinking with my girlfriends. I want to go out with the guys. Like, I want freedom. And I think there's, again, a healthy level of freedom and meeting each other's needs. We're not talking so much about that. We're talking about when it's gotten to a point where they're, really wanting out of responsibility and wanting out of commitment, and kind of more of that avoidant behavior there.
I think sometimes like another aspect of this is I think sometimes it can feel grating feeling accountable to someone constantly and having to check in. And I do think that can get to some unhealthy levels within a long-term relationship, especially. And at the same time, it's kind of part of a long-term relationship is you have impact on your partner and you do have some accountability with your partner. And sometimes that can feel hard, always being accountable to your partner.
Yeah. I'm thinking about some of the couples that we've worked with over the years, Marc, and maybe some of you listening will relate to this, where it's like the pendulum has swung so far to the extreme of feeling controlled, feeling manipulated, feeling like they're constantly breathing down your neck. And then if you go to the drama triangle, right, we've got the persecutor, we got the victim, we got the hero. It's a lot of this persecutor kind of victim of like, this is the way you have to do it. I'm feeling controlled. And then eventually the victim snaps and says, enough, I'm done. And so they swing to the opposite side of the pendulum and, want no restrictions, no accountability, instead of finding that really healthy balance of what makes the relationship work. So they kind of like swing from one end to the other in these really dramatic shifts, instead of really learning how to get out of the drama triangle, how to get creative, how to collaborate, how to meet each other's needs, how to have a healthy level of accountability, and also have a healthy level of freedom and space. So yeah, it's definitely can become a barrier there as well.
Absolutely. Another reason, we're just going to keep listing reasons here, Heather.
And let us know in the comments as you guys are hearing some of these, any other reasons that are coming up for you, or if any of them really resonate with you.
Another one is there just stops being any sort of benefit to working on the marriage, or I'm going to put that in quotes. Like that's the story. And I think a lot of this is where you get into work mode and you don't devote enough time to the nice things in the relationship. If your relationship becomes all work, chores, maintenance of the house, children, bills, why work on that then? Why try to do anything to fix that situation? There's really not a lot of incentive there if one person feels that way.
Yeah. And week before, can't remember, in a recent podcast, in the recent past, we were talking about, the incentives when you're making bids for connection, when you're making bids for intimacy or closeness, and those are rejected continually. It becomes very demotivating to want to put yourself out there and continue to ask for those things. And if you feel like, wow, that's really important to me that I have emotional connection, or I have sex and intimacy, and I have, it's really important to me that I have that in my marriage, and I don't, well, then why even do all this other work, right? My needs aren't being met here anyway. There's really no benefit. I'm not going to get what I need anyway. So what's the point? I see that a lot of times as well. And all those things fill up the next one, which is anger or resentment. And there's just a lot of tension, when there's a lot of volatility, when there's a lot of explosiveness and hurtfulness, it becomes a barrier for them to want to work on the relationship.
I think a lot of this, you mentioned that sort of pendulum sort of effect, and I'm not going to say this is always the case, but I would say that if there's a lot of anger or resentment that's coming out of nowhere, I think that is what's going on. And just to kind of fill everyone in, when we're talking about this pendulum effect, it's this phenomenon we see within a lot of relationships where the relationship tends to put up with a lot of something within the relationship, whether that is, having a lot of responsibility over the kids, or accommodating one partner over another, or whatever happens to be. There's some amount of ability to do something up to a certain point. Mm-hmm. And then what we tend to see is that those people who tend to not confront these problems, it will swing all the way in the other direction, and they blow up. They will, the quiet person is going to blow up, and you're going to see a lot of anger, a lot of like, I'm not going to do this anymore. That's where you get a lot of these situations that shift suddenly. And it tends to be that the whole reason why it will go back and forth like that, it'll blow up and then calm down, and we'll accommodate for a while until it blows up again, is because there's something preventing a more healthy middle ground. But I do say that, especially with quieter people, this is where a big reason for not wanting to work on the marriage is if that cycle of going back and forth keeps happening over and over again. Certainly, this can be a lot more at the surface, like a lot of anger and resentment with very short cycles. If that's happening, I feel like that's almost like a different situation. Mm-hmm. Would you say? And it almost seems like if that's a frequent state for one partner, it almost looks a little bit closer to like an abusive sort of situation, depending on what's going on. Right. We're going to point out like a lot of what we're describing here is not exhaustive, and we're not going to pretend like it describes everything to a T, because everyone has their own unique relationship and their unique situations. But these are some tendencies we see. Yeah.
And with the resentment, I was just going to say, sometimes it's a really slow burn, like a really low, slow burn that can be really underneath the surface and kind of brewing and there for years and years and years. And then all of a sudden, usually it just kind of comes to a head. But that resentment doesn't always maybe look like explosiveness. It could look like a lot of coldness. It could look like a lot of withdrawal. It could look like a lot of stonewalling, silent treatment. So the anger has like the fire side, and then the resentment can also take on kind of that icy cold side as well. Yeah. So that's definitely one. All right. Another one. Marriage has become a chore. Yes.
Yes.
It kind of goes along a little bit with like, it's no longer fulfilling. But it could be maybe not as maybe deep as issues is like when it's not fulfilling, it's like, it's just become tedious, right? It's become really tiresome.
I can see this like where couples go through the motions, or they might have time together, but that time isn't really fulfilling. And more often, if like the activities around marriage have become a chore, it's a lot of times because of like something like neediness, self-esteem issues, basically a lot of one-way support. So I might be spending time hypothetically with my wife, but if a lot of that time is spent having to reassure her or to make sure that she feels okay when we're going out on a date, much like we were talking about earlier, where there's not really a whole lot of benefits, or it's not very rewarding. It's kind of a different flavor of this. Yeah. Like whereas one where there's just not a lot of good, not a lot of focus on the good. This other flavor is more like, hey, there's time, there's place for potentially those good things. It's just those good moments are tainted, and then not a lot of great interactions are going on in those moments.
Yeah. If we're going to go back to the drama triangle for a minute, where I tend to see this the most is with the hero and the victim. Mm-hmm. So the hero is trying to like constantly give, and the victim's like, I need this and I needed this. And what about me? And, you need to say this, help me with this thing. And this is really hard, so the hero keeps trying to give and give and give and give to the person that feels like the victim, like it's not their fault and everyone else needs to fix it for them. I mean, this is such general terms, but I hope you guys can see where this like applies to your relationship or others that you know. And then eventually the hero just gets burnt out and they just get resentful because they can't sustain that. You can never give to another person enough to make them happy. You can never give to another person enough to make them feel good enough about themselves. It's our job to make ourselves feel good enough about ourselves, to have self-confidence and self-worth and self-love. That's so important. And then we can meet together as better, wholer versions of ourselves, more complete versions of ourselves. And that just amplifies the beauty of the relationship. But it does become a little lopsided. It can often feel like a chore. It can feel like I just have to give here all the time and I don't really get my needs met. And you can start to develop some of that resentfulness and like, I just don't want to do this anymore. This is no longer fun. It's not rewarding and it's not changing. So I need out. So if your partner is saying anything like that, you can maybe understand a little more now where they're coming from, or maybe you felt that way yourself. All right. This is a big one. Mental health. This is a big one. And it seems like to me, this is the big epidemic actually of what's going on in the world more and more. And it can go from anything from, we've got anxiety and depression is a vast amount of the Western population, probably the global population, but especially in Western culture. And it could even be going into narcissism, other personality disorders that cause, an extreme focus on self. We've done entire podcasts on narcissism. So if you want to look any of those up, I encourage you guys to do that because there's a lot of misunderstanding about that as well. But it is, can be another big challenge. Depression, bipolar, other mood disorders, and of course, a lot of past trauma. If there was past abuse, past sexual abuse, physical, emotional abuse, that can cause a lot of difficulty with connecting and trusting others in relationship. So past history of abuse, PTSD is another one. I have a little bit of experience with that in a previous relationship to my husband. And it was a thing, like it was a real thing. And as much as you love that person, there's only so much that you can do. Like they need to get that level of professional help in order to be in a place to have a healthy, functional relationship. So yeah, we definitely see that those are real challenges that need to be addressed with care and compassion. But if this is going on, sometimes the supporting partner is just burnt out, feels like they can't fix it for the person, feels like they just can't handle the situation. Sometimes their partner isn't willing to go get help. I know a lot of people with some mood disorders, bipolar, stuff like that, have a really hard time recognizing it and wanting to get help. And so that can be a reason why your partner wants out. And if you are the person experiencing this, or your spouse is, it just goes both ways. So it becomes something that needs to be handled with a lot of care and a lot of professional support.
So a lot of this is like why your partner isn't fighting for your marriage or why they're not coming back. And a lot of these mental health disorders do have a big impact on this. Like, let's say it's something like narcissistic personality disorder or other personality disorders. Some of these might cause an extreme focus on self. Depression or bipolar disorder, other mood disorders might have a really big impact on motivation and willingness to go through hard things for the reward at the other end. A lot of that trauma or, PTSD issues from the past might have make it so that people are unwilling to deal with deeply uncomfortable situations. And so all of these have different blocks in different ways in how people are showing up in the relationship.
Yep.
So the way I'm seeing a lot of these, we're just like listing things off. I think a good way to view this, we're going to have a few more reasons, like we were just listing off situations where it's creating a lack of interest in making things better. We're going to get to in a second, what happens if they are interested, but there are blocks. But just to kind of give some structure to all of this, I think a lot of this does apply to our 5 pillars of a healthy relationship. We've talked about that a bunch recently, right? And these 5 pillars, just very, very quickly, are fulfillment and how well your needs are supported. Feedback, how well you can talk about that if things are going well or not. And intimacy, how deeply are those needs met within your relationship? How open and vulnerable can you be? Positive regard, like what is your narrative about your each other? And is there commitment and security? And a lot of these issues that we've been listing off really have a big impact somewhere on those pillars. Whether we're talking about emotional wounding, and I would see that as a big problem with feedback and intimacy. If there's someone else, that's a big issue with feeling fulfilled.
And commitment, intimacy, yes.
Exactly, commitment. It hits on a lot of those. You're right. Yeah. But I don't know, the way my mind works with a lot of these things is it feels nice to be able to say, hey, there are some good themes and some different ways to look at this. We have very specific reasons and it's fitting. I don't know. It feels nice to be able to have it fit nicely into some boxes here that make it a little bit easier to understand.
Right. And as we were going through these, and as we're going to go into the next part here about what is, maybe they are willing to work on things with you, but there's something holding them back. What is our point here? It's A, to help you uncover what the real problem is. And B is to gain perspective, which is P in path is perspective of our path method. Is we want to understand where they're really coming from. And oftentimes, we'll have a client and be like, my wife just will not be sexually intimate with me. She just is closed up. She's so resistant. She doesn't like it. and I don't understand what's going on there. And then if you realize, oh yeah, well, she had a history of abuse, right? That can give you a lot of perspective and understanding in what's going on there. If it's been emotional wounding, oh, that's a totally different way of looking at it. If it's, she wants freedom and that's not, happening. And that's another, there's anger or resentment. Maybe it's become a chore, right? All of these different things could be a root issue about why you're experiencing that issue in your marriage. So now let's flip things. And so let's say that your spouse is interested or at least somewhat willing to work on things with you and make them better, but something's holding them back. We often see things like what we call the teeter-totter effect, right? Maybe it feels like your spouse is hot one minute and then cold another minute. They're willing to work on things with you and then they're not. They have a great conversation with you and then they disappear, like emotionally for a couple of days, right? Or even physically, maybe they disappear for a couple of days. Maybe they say things like, I love you, but I'm not in love with you. I need to find myself. We're better as friends. I need space. Those kind of things means that they are interested. They're not 100% unwilling to work on it with you, but there's some barriers there. So what are the possibilities here, Marc, that's causing that?
Well, oftentimes, like if this is the situation, there's an element of hopelessness, and it comes in a few different flavors. Perhaps they are clueless as to how to make things work, or maybe they're possibly embarrassed and they don't want to try. Like they don't want to, like they kind of understand, maybe I need to go to therapy, but it's hard to be open with a therapist. I see this a lot with, especially if there's like persistent or ongoing problems. And so like the partner might approach this and be like, hey, look, I wish things could have been worked out. I just don't know how we deal with this thing right here. I know that I should go to therapy and maybe that could have some sort of solution there, but I just can't bring myself to get around this. Like, it's just, I don't know how to make this thing work right here. And I see that with some frequency, where it tends to get to the point of divorce, it's almost like this one thing is ignored for a long time, this one piece of the relationship. And it's just we're going to keep it in this little bubble for as long as we can until it's too much and it bursts open and we can't deal with it. And it's been going on so long that we don't know how to deal with it.
Yeah. I think
go ahead.
A lot of couples are in. And that's why so many marriages are ending in divorce and so many couples are not actually happy, is because you haven't learned how to do it. And there's some pride of like, I don't want to be considered a problem. Like, I'm a problem person that has to go get help, right? We don't like to label ourselves as needing help or being a problem, right? Or having a problem. And we get embarrassed about it. And sometimes it just prevents us from being able to take any kind of action. And it's really not taught. So I want to take like the guilt and the shame out of this, that so many couples are not saving their marriage because we aren't taught how to make things work, how to solve those problems. I love that analogy that you gave, like that little bubble. It just keeps growing and we just keep putting it in this bubble. And then all of a sudden it just cannot hold it anymore. We tried to do elephant toothpaste last night. My son did it with his friends as an activity the other night. And he's like, yeah, I'll do it. So, he's 12. So he gets all the ingredients, puts them in this bottle. And then my husband screws the cap on it. And we just see this like bottle, like almost about to burst, I'm like, it's going to blow. You just feel all that like tension building inside of that container. And it's like, eventually that container cannot hold it anymore. And just there it goes. And it was a big mess and my kids loved it. But in your marriage, it's not so fun, right? When you feel that tension just building and building and building. And so one of the things that we offer are those solutions. So you don't have to let the tension get to that point where it's just going to explode. It's just going to come out and it's just going to be a mess. And then we're going to be so overwhelmed by the situation that we're just going to give up because we don't know how to try to even get it to work. And we don't even know where to start. And it feels like too big of a thing we just give up. We think it's hopeless. There's nothing I can do about it. And we've been building up that story of there's nothing I can do about this. I don't know what to do with it for so long that by the time it gets there, yeah, it does become a bit of a barrier holding them back from wanting to work on it with you.
I think another flavor of this, very similar, we've listed it as a separate reason, but is the fear or expectation of failure.
Yeah.
One is more like, I don't think that there are solutions, or another is like, we've tried solutions many times over and just nothing works. Yeah. I see, now this isn't going to describe everyone, but I see it many times. What has happened in these situations is that people haven't really invested fully into the solutions. The people that I see that say, I've tried everything, really means, I've read a book and I tried being nicer a little bit, but I didn't talk about things. Like, you get what I'm talking about here, Heather. Like, they've touched the surface of solutions. And I see that often is like where this sits, because they're just worried that something about approaching the solution is too difficult, and so they completely avoid it. They say it's not going to work anyway.
Yeah, and sometimes the advice is just plain out garbage.
There's that.
I think a lot of people have great intent, and that no one's really purposely trying to steer people into things that don't work, but it's just really not productive help. And that the things that they're getting are completely ineffective for the situation that they're in, and often cause the situation to get worse. And that's the problem. I'm a personal, development, self-help junkie. Okay. But there are absolute limitations to what a book can do to saving a marriage. And I'll just give an example here. Like, maybe you tried things like, looking at YouTube videos or doing the personal development book, right? So at first I did the love dare because I was like, oh, I resonate so much with that. And I just tried to do all this service to Ben, just service and service and service. And that's not his love language. And it did not get very far because he didn't feel heard. He's like, great, that's nice that you did that, but you're like not looking at this thing that I'm hurt about, right? And so it didn't actually resolve the issue that was at hand. And then I thought, okay, I'll go back to love languages. And love languages are good, but they're also very surface level. So physical touch only goes so far when you've got like a hurting heart. You know what I mean? So a lot of these things, while they do have value and they do have a place, they don't often go deep enough into your exact situation to be an effective solution. So you may have tried things, but they maybe haven't included professional help, really studying and understanding what your situation is, putting in the effort. Sometimes this is an interesting phenomenon. Some people will come and pay money and then disappear. Like, they're willing to say, oh, I bought this thing, so now I don't have to do the work. That doesn't cut it, right? You have to put in the effort. You can't just say, I tried everything because I paid for something and then disappeared on it. No, the results come as you put in the effort, right? Maybe there's no emotional vulnerability. Maybe you aren't willing to be vulnerable here or just do anything productive. So the bottom line is that you need to know what's actually going to work in your situation. I think this is a fitting place to say it, but you can't read the label when you're inside the bottle. And so many times we're like trying to read our own label and like self-diagnose the situation. And we're putting in, maybe you're like, Heather, I am putting in effort. Cause I actually talked to a lot of people, Marc, in our audience that are putting in a lot of effort, and they're exhausted putting in so much effort, and they don't realize that it's actually not productive with the way they're going about it. It's actually backfiring. So not only do you need someone that knows how to read the label on your bottle, but they need to diagnose the situation properly and then provide the right treatment plan. And when you guys do that, like, your efforts, it's still hard. Like our client Wynn said, like, it's still hard. It's not an easy road, but it's so much more effective and it's rewarding. So it's not easy, but it's worth it. And you see that the effort that you're putting in is actually going somewhere. That's what I love about what we do. And another thing is that you might be putting in a lot of effort, but it may be just flat out invisible to your partner. They may not see that what you're doing is even there. So sometimes you're putting in all this effort, and A, they don't realize that you're doing it. They don't even see it. Or B, they just don't care anymore, which would go more to the earlier type that we talked about. And so what we help you do is help communicate to your spouse so they see the effort that you're making and they receive it, and you're doing it in a way that's actually going to be received by them.
Yeah, I think, like I said earlier, is if you're doing all these things and it's not having an impact, it really can kill that that sense that things can be fixed. And so that whole reason here, this fear or expectation of failure kind of sets in when you start to dabble in a lot of solutions. And you mentioned earlier, this kind of shotgun or buckshot effect. I think it can have that negative impact potentially.
Shotgun. Thank you. I bet some of you were sitting there like, Heather, oh my goodness. Shotgun. Thank you.
Sometimes you have buckshot in a shotgun shell. Anyway.
Yeah. If you guys want us to read the label on your bottle, leave a comment saying me, and we will help you uncover what's really going on there. Another barrier here, Marc, that prevents them, holds them back from being willing to work on things with you. Discomfort with negative emotions. What do we see happening there?
Sometimes I'll admit that sometimes I sit with that a little bit. Like my wife and I, we liked all those happy moments. And sometimes we really, really have to push to like taking a look at some of those uncomfortable things that are going on between us. I'll raise my hand and say, hey, we tend to be a little bit more conflict avoidant in our household. Mm-hmm. This is a whole subset of conflict resolution styles described by Gottman is that conflict avoidant style. Mm-hmm. And sometimes this can really prevent people from seeing that there are solutions, from preventing someone from saying, yeah, I want to fight for the marriage, because they're saying, I just can't touch these things anymore. I don't want to deal with this anymore. The problem tends to come about when people are so avoidant of these things that they're willing to wait till the house is figuratively burning down around them before they are roused enough to do something. And sometimes at that point, it's just too late. And so someone says, okay, now let's take a look at this. And your partner is like all used to being very avoidant with these topics. And they're like, we don't ever deal with this. We are not going to be dealing with this. We can't deal with this. And I would love for this to work. I don't see any way it can because of this.
Yeah. And this is where a lot of you may be seeing some of that hot and cold. Like maybe they're really warm and when things are nice and things are pleasant. And then as soon as you bring up something a little negative, they're like shutting down again and they're pulling away because they just have a lot of discomfort with those negative emotions. And there's a way that we can help you. We're not going too much into solutions today. I just can't help it though, to make things feel safe and comfortable so that they're able to work through those with you because negative emotion is part of life. And there are some of us that are more comfortable with that than others, but we need to understand their perspective and have some compassion for them if they really have a hard time with negative emotions, or maybe we're the one that has a hard time with negative emotions. So, and then that brings us to our last one here, which is poor communication. And I think a lot of you are going to be like, communication is probably the problem with all of it. And there's some truth to that. It's communication. It's also understanding where our partner is coming from, which is why we wanted to go so deep into this today, into perspective, which is helping your partner feel understood. I
do think that in particular, Heather, is like what might prevent someone else from considering working on the relationship is, poor communication causes this, but it's this sense of not feeling understood, or I can't work on the marriage because if I do, my partner is not going to hear me out. They're not going to listen to me, or, conversely, like maybe that person who is stepping away just has no room to try and understand you. They just say, I don't even know what's going on with this other person. I can't deal with them. But like poor communication is the cause, but I think it results in a lack of understanding, and that can really be a barrier to someone wanting or feeling like they can work on the marriage.
Agreed. All right. So comment below. What stood out to you? What are you experiencing in your marriage? We my gosh, I can't talk. We respond to every single comment that we get, and we would be happy to help you with that. And then, of course, next week we'll go deeper into it. But let's go on now to our marriage Mythbuster. I think this one's kind of funny. I won't have to deal with my in-laws much after the wedding. So I'm assuming that people who haven't been married very long are the ones that are thinking this. Because if any of us have been married for a little while or even a long while, we know that that's completely false.
Well, I was trying to
most cases.
I was trying to figure out like who would be saying this sort of thing. And I imagine it's the kind of people who are not getting along with their in-laws or their potentially future in-laws. Maybe there's cases where your partner's family of origin is not very nice or good. I imagine like there is some situations where, you might be saying, okay, well, it makes sense to do this, to just kind of cut out your partner's family of origin, your in-laws there. And I do occasionally see this. I think there is some amount of belief that your partner's family doesn't really matter when considering marriage. And to a certain extent, that's true, right? There's this idea that you create your own unique family once you're married. You have you are like the specific unit here. Yeah. And there's a lot of ability to make your family as you want, but you might need to even if you are not going to interact with your in-laws, there are a lot of factors that should be considered in terms of your partner's family of origin. Like, what if there's been childhood trauma? What if your partner's parents had a different parenting style than your own? Very likely, that's going to impact your partner and how they want to parent. But if your partner's family of origin had different values, conflict styles, political views than your family of origin,
religious views, yeah,
it's going to have a big impact here. And essentially, where your partner came from has a high amount of impact, even if you're not going to be physically around them. Beyond this, though, the assumption that you won't have to deal with your in-laws is the wrong way to view problems with your partner's family. Like, healthy relationships are one that are built on mutual support, ones where each of you feel supported in the relationships that you carry into your marriage. And imagine if we reverse that. If we said, okay, like your husband or wife are like, well, I don't have to deal with your parents anymore now that we're married. It starts to feel very wrong in that case. Even if like you don't have a great relationship, I do see in many even dysfunctional families of origin, there is usually some amount of connection still throughout life, because your parents and your siblings, they don't just disappear usually. In my experience, it's a very rare situation for your family of origin to not have any interaction with you and your partner post-marriage. I certainly think that there are a lot of things that can be done to create healthy relationships with in-laws, with your partner's family of origin. There's a lot that we could discuss in terms of boundaries and healthy interactions and where your loyalty should sit, which, by the way, should always be with your spouse. Yes. over anyone's family of origin. But I think that's another discussion entirely. So if you are even looking at this and saying, hey, I'm stepping into this relationship, I'm stepping into this marriage, and maybe I won't have to deal with my in-laws, that is absolutely, it's just not going to work out well if you go into it thinking that. Won't work well at all.
Right. Much better to come at it from the PATH method: perspective, adjustment, tell a new story, and have hope, right? Of healing relationships. It tends to have a ripple effect when you try to ostracize or cut someone off. You're really saying no to a beautiful opportunity to learn how to have a healthier relationship and experience yourself. So thank you guys so much for watching today. If you guys like this, if you're on YouTube, give us a thumbs up. Again, leave us a comment. If you guys want that marriage assessment, leave a comment saying me, and we will help you uncover what's really going on there and help you guys get the next solutions to move your marriage forward. All right, next week, we're going to be doing part 2 of this, which I'm really excited for. I hope this was a service and help give you some clarity. But next week, we're going to go into those emotional reasons that prevent your spouse from coming back and solutions on how to resolve those reasons. So thank you so much for joining us today, and we will talk to you very soon.
Thanks for listening to The Thriving Marriage, your A to Z blueprint for not just surviving marriage, but thriving. Until next time, my friends, thrive on.